Kyle, your comment on distilled water.
I've researched this, and there are some people that I respect greatly who have been using distilled water. Now, don't jump in on me. Let me finish. And I do respect them greatly, and they've taught me a lot, those particular people. But they're still dealing with a very rigid mindset where they're thinking that water is supposed to be pure. Water in nature is not pure. It's full of all sorts of energy patterns and all sorts of different substances in certain proportions naturally. And this is important. Now, you take the energy patterns with different types of photography, and you can use the method of Theodor Schwenk over I think in Prague, in Czechoslovakia. You can use many different types of Kirlian photography, and you'll find out that unless something special has been done to that distilled water after it's been distilled, it's dead. And it'll steal electrons from the body, and when you look at the energy patterns, the energy measurements shown in certain documents, then you'll find that that will have the same energy readings as cancer. And I looked at that, and after that I decided I wouldn't use distilled water anymore.
This is exactly what has been found by the bioelectric Vincent machine. They tested the distilled water and found out it's dead water and cancer forming.
You spoke initially about entrainment, and you spoke about 7 basic type of frequency patterns that would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it correct to say that with this unit you're going through that vortex where essentially you're stripping away the patterns that are in the water? Like, in other words, the negative patterns that would have been in that water before it went through are removed? Is that correct?
They're removed by a stronger entrainment. So all of the energy patterns get broken up, and it gets re-entrained into
those
into
beneficial patterns.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a bit like a memory erase, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's an unprogramming and a reprogramming simultaneously.
That's how I understand it. Now I have.
And basically, whatever toxins and things are still physically present in the water, they, as a result of the way that the water molecules will react with them after it's passed through this unit, essentially all those toxins are going to just pass right through the body and have no effect upon you. Is that correct?
That's been the conclusion of several good researchers in Europe. And I've read those studies, and that just seems to be how it is. Now I have difficulty with it.
Even things like fluoride and I mean all the most insidious ones we can think of, they're neutralized according to the research.
They're bound within the electronic cloud that projects at an opposite axis to the attachment of the hydrogen to the oxygen in the water molecule. So it comes off the other side, and it comes off and there's this helical shape, and these water molecules, they sort of clump around it in this tetrahedral configuration, and then the only thing the body gets to touch is the H's.
Which will be water.
Yeah, but the things are stuck inside, and as an extension of that implosion energy principle, which would open up a bigger can of worms, that they will stay centralized to the right in the center of the circulating blood volume, and as it travels, they'll be bound in the center of the blood flow. They won't be able to move out to the cells, and the other toxins will reverse their polarity and be pulled into the center and carried out along with the original ones.
So basically everything gets trapped within what you've referred to as that liquid crystal, and the liquid crystal itself is non-reactive. It doesn't combine with anything in the body other than other toxins, which it keeps pulling into the inner part of itself.
This is a principle that Grander's been teaching.
So let's take Brisbane water, which contains a lot of chlorine. What you are saying then is that this will actually neutralize the chlorine sufficiently by changing the actual electronic structure of it sufficiently that part of the electrons will be caught up in the electron cloud around it, which would then render it harmless to organic matter, and thus allowing it to pass out through the human body without interacting with organic matter, causing the trihalomethanes.
This is Grander's,
that has how you see that.
This is Grander's conclusion, and that's my understanding of it.
No.
But I energized a pool, a chlorinated pool, and the water went very silky smooth and clear and sparkly, and I dived in it, and I had hardly any irritation at all on my conjunctiva, which I don't swim in chlorine, basically. And I hopped out, and my skin was smooth, and it doesn't smell of chlorine after you energize it. The smell goes. And I've taken chlorinated water on one hand and poured it through. I've never done it with Brisbane water, but I've taken chlorinated water, poured it through, and I live about 500 meters across the valley from a place where they bubble chlorine gas directly through the Mudgeeraba water supply. And it comes out, you smell it, and I poured it through, and on the other side you can't smell it. I don't know what exactly that means, but I think it means it's bound up.
It's bound up or it is neutralized so it cannot bind itself chemically to the other substances.
Yep. That's the way it seems.
Now this is where you're getting into transitional elements where even if you test it, you won't find the chlorine. Even though the chlorine is there, it will not be detectable as chlorine on a regular test, because you do that with colloidal metals, and your metals will transfer from one metal to another, and when they're in the transitory state, you can't even tell that it's there. But you change the heat and change the frequency that you treat that colloidal metal with, and all of a sudden, the next time that you do the heat treatment on it, or to get that little bit of metal in the bottom of the crucible, fire assay method, all of a sudden you have gold there where there wasn't gold before.
I have a friend who did that.
Yeah, well, I worked on that for several years as a hobby, and we did that. But it's a transitional metal. And if you're putting this into transitional chlorine, then I understand the principle.
You're a step ahead of me.
Oh, it's very simple. I'll explain it to you someday.
Okay.
Okay, this is getting into really interesting stuff, because we know of what we call biological transmutation of the elements in the body. The same thing is happening here, and you're putting this into a half state from one element to another in a biological transmutation.
Now, where you have an abundance of your negatively charged hydrogens and an abundance of your dissolved oxygen in the water, when that water is ingested, the body is then predisposed, number one, from the energy patterns that are in it, and number two, from the abundance of the oxygen and the hydrogen, is then predisposed towards an increased ability towards the biological transmutations. Because you look at Louis Kervran's research, and you find that the transmutations that he has documented are all involved with either oxygen or hydrogen, and very occasionally silicon.
Okay, let's look at here's the facts involved, bottom line. You take your organic material in the human body will be a carbon-hydrogen matrix, right? Okay, now, if you want to break up that carbon-hydrogen matrix, which would be in the form of the melanin protein complex that we have in the body, you have to have the oxygen, and then you take the hydrogen and put that into a negative ion formation. It'll break up. We have to have oxygen, and you have to have hydrogen specially treated through certain treatment of water, which breaks up that hydrogen bondage with oxygen.
Gives it a negative charge.
Right, give it a negative charge, and this will then break up the melanin protein complex in the human body.
If there's any people here who've been rigidly indoctrinated with your chemistry training, they're just going to be an absolute aghast right now.
This is the way it works.
This is how it's been documented.